inside my head, becoming blurred by so much said. I'm in too deep waters I tread, can't catch my breath. A shadow chasing me, a game of hide and seek. Found they'll have a beat.
All right, welcome everyone to another edition of Deconversion Stories. Today we have the pleather. We're into pleather. Today we have the pleasure of chatting with the lovely Sophia, or Red Angel Sophia, which is the name of her YouTube channel, and she also has a second YouTube channel where she does a lot of her artistic stuff. All of it's linked below if you want to go and check that out. Welcome to the show, Sophia.
Thank you for having me here.
Our pleasure. You were introduced to me by Mr. Elliot, otherwise known as Secular Rarity. So we were hooked up via Twitter to arrange all of this. That guy.
Oh, that guy.
Damn long-haired guys. Oh, wait, what am I saying? So let me just pull out the locks. There we go.
Pull my hood up so you can't see it.
So what we do here is we chat with folks about their journeys away from whatever version of a faith or belief system they're once a part of. And we kind of like it to take us back into the early days of when you were sort of involved with that, how that started falling apart, and what led you into becoming the atheist that you are today.
It's a very long story, and it actually starts with how I got into religion in the first place.
All right.
Because most people that you hear these stories about, they get their religion from home. Me, though, the only thing my parents did that resulted in me becoming very religious was in picking what part of the country to raise me in. A land where religion is everywhere and everywhere else. I grew up in East Tennessee, which is a extremely religious part of the country.
It's like Bible Belt area.
It's like the buckle of the Bible Belt. Grew up a few hours away from where the Scopes trial took place.
Oh, wow.
And then some years later, somebody was chatting with me online, and he mentioned, "Oh, you won't check this out. This high school somewhere where the principal recalled the whole issue of the school newspaper because of an interview with a gynecologist that mentioned, I guess, something that and I looked at it, and he showed me that story. I was like, dude, that's my high school. I was on the staff of that newspaper my senior year.
Oh, wow.
The Daily Bugle.
It was the Oak Leaf, but yeah. And thing is, the gynecologist that was interviewed in that article was no atheist, but a devout Catholic. So, and he
okay.
And still, he said something that was too controversial for the censors in East Tennessee.
What was the topic that made everyone so up in arms?
I don't remember anymore. This was years ago, but I'm just letting you know. This is like something that was like internet. This person had no idea where in the world I was, and they just said something that was, that was my high school.
Was this during the time you were there?
No, this happen? Not while I was there. It was some years later.
Okay.
But there was the same journalism teacher. And I'd been in the same swim team as the daughter of that gynecologist. I'd been in the same swim team as the daughter of that gynecologist. So.
Okay, so what ended up? So, were you was your family religious? Like, were you churchgoers or anything
No,
like that in the early years?
we were like very secular Jews, mostly for the
Okay, so like
culture.
me.
Yeah, so you're Jewish too?
Yeah, I grew up Jewish. Yeah, I was
Yeah.
actually born to a couple of Catholics, but they were young, and it was very bad to have sex out of wedlock, so I was put up for adoption. I've met them since, and I've known them now for over 20 something years now. So, but um, yeah. So, and then I was raised Jewish and bar mitzvah, the whole thing. So,
Yeah, well, yeah,
really much of a believer.
yeah. But basically, it was more about the culture.
Yeah.
My parents both grew up in Haifa.
Oh wow, I've been to Haifa. Beautiful little town.
My dad was born there. My mom was born in Tiberias.
Okay. Very nice.
But
Last time I was in Haifa, I went to a buddy of mine's uncle's store, and his uncles he had like 5 or 6 uncles, and they'd all sit out front of the store and eat these little tiny chili peppers like they were candy. So I tried one time, and my mouth was on fire for like days. So I don't know, how do these guys do this, but oh well.
it's an Israeli thing.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Yeah, definitely.
Doesn't sound like fun at all. Sounds awful.
Well, I survived, and that's all that matters, really.
Y'all didn't have a date tree or figs, something nice?
Yeah.
Oh, when I was there, we would like go into the tree and eat fresh pine nuts, or snobberim as they're called in Hebrew.
Yeah, snowboarding. Yeah, and they did have fig trees, and they had date trees and olive trees, and you name it.
Yeah, because I visited there a few times during the summer, so that's how I know about the. But yeah, that was one thing I very much remember doing, is going into the trees and my visits there and eating fresh pine nuts.
Yeah, I remember those. Those are tasty. Yeah, I lived there for a couple of years in Ramat HaSharon, so I went to school, grade 11 and 12, finished high school over there. So I was young, and and drank a lot because they didn't care how old you were there.
So I know.
Good times.
So I know that I'm not going to actually try doing it because I know our audience don't necessarily. But I'm guessing you speak Hebrew too.
A little bit. It's been a long time since I've used it, so a lot of it's kind of forgotten, sort of thing. Like I could say that in Hebrew. But yeah, no, I mean, I do spout out some Hebrew once in a while, just phrases that I remember and stuff like that, especially the swear words.
Yeah,
like riding a bike.
Yeah.
Oh, when I was really young, sitting in the car when my dad was driving, he toned it down later on, but he used to, while driving, curse like a sailor in Hebrew. And can you believe that there's some people who think that Hebrew doesn't have swear words?
Oh yes, they do. Well, they're what they would call swear words. They're literally like express, like one, like prepare people. Like one of the ones that you'd hear a lot was kusemuk or something like that, like which literally means like your mother's pussy, sort of thing.
The kolorochot.
Yeah.
The English translation isn't so offensive, but it's a curse in Hebrew. Chara, whose translation might get censorship.
Chara, that's shit, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they had the expression. Yeah, I guess eat shit was one of the ones they used to do, and they had all kinds of different swear words there. But anyways, we're off topic here.
Oh yes, we are. Anyways, the thing is, it wasn't from home that I got all this religious religiosity. It was from the environment, and
okay.
And basically, since everything was about religion, I basically found myself also since I also was always in a very precarious position, because I know a lot of Jews can pass as like everyone else, but I can't. I'm very visibly Jewish.
Right.
Um, some people were actually surprised to hear that I'm Ashkenazi because they have their misconceptions about what Ashkenazi Jews look like. A lot of people think that Ashkenazi are white Jews, which is not exactly accurate. It's
No.
not exactly accurate, but so they were surprised when they hear that I was Ashkenazi. Um, but yeah, my sister is completely passable, but not me. Uh, anyways, basically, a clearly Middle Eastern person, autistic in East Tennessee, and though I was not yet out even to myself as transgender,
Mhm.
um, anyone could tell that I didn't really fit the male stereotype. And
Right.
so basically, because of all of these differences in a very hostile place like East Tennessee, I was constantly in a precarious situation. And what do people in precarious situations do? They search for assurance, and that meant turning to higher powers. At first, in defiance of the culture, I tried to do so in a more Jewish manner. That
Hmm.
didn't work partly because there wasn't really much infrastructure in East Tennessee for that. There's
Right.
still now there's a little bit, but then there was even less. Then I tried looking into other religions, and sometime in my mid 20s, I ended up going into the Catholic Church.
Oh, interesting.
Y-
What
Yeah.
attracted you to the Catholic Church?
A lot of it, I'm not sure exactly, but I think a lot of it was the ritualism that,
They say that Catholicism, of all the Christian branches, Catholicism ritualistically is very close to Judaism and the ritualistic stuff of Judaism as well, which I've known a couple other ex-Jews will say that converted over to Catholicism. So I think there's some similarities too between the two. Of course, completely different sort of belief systems, but still, I think there's some similarities that are attractive to
Yeah.
Jews that are unhappy with their faith.
there are similarities, but there's also differences.
Oh yeah.
And there's also lots of differences, but the ritualism seemed to be one that really, the form of ritualism that's in Catholicism was one that really seemed to jive with me. As a matter of fact, after deconverting, I actually spent a lot of time of personal research trying to come up with secular substitutes for some of that,
Hmm.
and had mixed results.
What was probably some of the more prominent things that popped up for you when you went to look for something like that?
Well, I actually came up with developed a short communion ritual, atheistic communion, a secular communion ritual, where instead of telling yourself that the cracker is the body and blood of Christ, you tell yourself that it is a microcosm of the universe, given as a reminder of your interconnectedness with the universe and everything in it.
Sure. Okay.
Um, Basically, the idea was to come up with something that would give me the same feeling that Catholic communion would give, without any of the without you having to resort to any unverified beliefs.
Gotcha. Okay. Because yeah, I mean, we are children of stars, basically.
Oh
All
yes, it
the
was it
atoms in
was
your
mentioned.
bodies.
Yeah, it mentioned that in that ritual the the role of early stars as the forges where all of the heavy elements were made.
Yep. including carbon, which is what we're mostly made of. Well, and hydrogen and other elements as well. 4 main ones, but and a bunch of little other ones. We pretty much almost have all of them in this.
Yeah, all of that cosmology is actually in the text of that ritual.
Oh, cool. So you actually made a text for the ritual.
Yeah, the only problem is it wasn't like a full mass, but more like the equivalent of just the anaphora section of the mass.
Mm-hmm.
So because it was not so because it wasn't a whole mass, but just like the anaphora section, it can't be done as often without losing its potency, because then it becomes just blah routine if it's done too often without changing little things up. You know what I'm saying? Yes.
That's cool.
So yeah,
That's
we're
cool.
getting off topic a bit, aren't we?
That's okay. It's all part of it, right? Like it's just part of your journey. So, and what you
Yeah,
came
it
up
is.
with and stuff like that. So
But
no
that
problem
was
at
like,
all.
but I only did that after I was in a position of, I did other things that were far more controversial from a religious point of view before I fully did.
Oh yeah. So would you let us or fill us in on some of that stuff?
Okay, it was a year. The first time I left Christianity was a year after I started my transition.
Okay.
Basically, I had always thought of the church as its role being to like stand up for the poor and the oppressed. But ever since I started my transition, I saw them instead being the ones spearheading the attacks.
Yeah. Yeah.
But then I heard about a certain court case. Don't remember how it resolved, but the fact that it came up, regardless of how it would resolve, was the last straw in making me leave the church the first time. I had an in and out relationship with the church for quite a while. And basically, it was a trans woman who was ready for her breast augmentation surgery and in California. And she had found which doctor she wanted to do the operation. The doctor was ready to do it. But then a Catholic organization bought that hospital. And then the religious order that was in charge of it basically said, like, no, you can't have that operation here. God made you a man. And this is the same operation that would be uncontroversial if it was done to a cisgender woman. So basically she was suing for discrimination, and they were claiming religious freedom as a defense.
Oh, wow. Fuck.
And what made this the last straw wasn't the matter about whether or not religion can exempt someone from anti-discrimination laws, but it's the fact that their religion would make them even want to do that.
Yeah, yeah.
It was a last straw. And I went for a while, since I didn't want to be completely without, since I wasn't ready to be without any God. I went into paganism and saw that there are some pretty bad cults there too.
Yeah, there are. Yeah, I delved into that myself.
Oh, so you actually have written about some of the pagan.
I've not written about any of them, but
spoken about it.
I have. Yeah, I've also I was considering myself Wiccan for a while and stuff like that. So I most of my late 20s and 30s was I went into that realm for quite a while, and then found my way free of all that too.
But anyways, all of the mistreatment I was getting in the South, in East Tennessee, which is where I lived at the time. Still, it was only I lived there until 2014. Um, all the mistreatment I was there was causing to drive me to drinking,
Oh yeah.
and I went into AA even though they were not the right fit for me. They were for a completely different kind of drinker. I mean, my alcoholism magically disappeared when I moved out of East Tennessee. It's not, I say magically, metaphorically. It's perfectly naturalistic, a chain of causality, but
Yeah.
um, but I mean, seemingly magically disappeared when I left East Tennessee, when I moved up to Pennsylvania. Um, anyways, it was due to a sponsorial overreach, and there's a lot of sponsorial overreach that goes on in AA.
Oh yes.
And that's another thing they need to be called out for. Not saying they should disappear, but that they need to do better. But that's a whole other subject, which I'd be happy to talk with you another time about. But I guess that would be off topic here.
Well, I think they rely heavily on religious stuff in AA, and I don't think that that's necessary for what they're doing.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I agree with you completely there. But anyways, so that was what drove me into Christianity, and so I would at first try every cycle. I would basically at first try going into the Episcopalian Church. And there's some regions of the country where the Episcopalian Church would be very much embracing a refugee from the Catholic Church, and helping them feel as much at home in the Episcopalian Church as possible. But there's other churches where they want practically to remind you every moment that you're now in the Episcopalian Church. They try to like take away your Catholic rosary and put an Anglican rosary in your hand instead. Which was very jarring for me, and that would then push me back into the Catholic Church, where I would suffer spiritual abuse, which is largely the inspiration for that song. And then that would force me into like praying at home thing. So it was like a cycle of praying at home, Episcopalian, Catholic Church, praying at home, Episcopalian. Oh, I forgot to mention, by the way, a certain Orthodox church that I was very close friends with in the days for a few years before I started my transition. I forgot to mention them. Yeah, a certain Orthodox church that I was very close friends with. That basically the day I transitioned, I was told I may not present myself there as a woman.
What? Really?
Yeah.
Holy
Yeah, certain
shit.
Orthodox. Aren't one of them big Orthodox churches, but like a small, tiny autocephalous Orthodox, very small autocephalous Orthodox church that's probably not even recognized by any of the big ones. But
well, there's so many different denominations of Christianity alone, so
yeah, so and that they're not a major part of my deconversion story, though. They're more of a major part of my transition story. But anyways, at this point, after I'd gone into AA, there was that cycle of Episcopalian church, Catholic church, praying at home, and and by the way, the incident, um, the incident that's in the music video, the music video is inspired by an incident that happened during this time period, the day after the United States versus Windsor judgment came down at daily mass, and it was and something that the priest said in his homily then that day.
Which what was that decision? Well, like
That
what
was
was
the one that said that if your state allows same-sex marriage, then the federal government will recognize it for you and other people in your state.
Right.
Had no effect on states that don't allow same-sex marriages, and therefore it had no effect on Tennessee,
Right.
which is where this priest was.
Yeah, it seems to be getting even worse down there right now with all of that stuff. With the Roe v. Wade stuff, and then now they're trying to go after contraception. They're going after same-sex marriages. They're going after transgendered people now, and it's just like, I don't know what's going on down there, but it's not looking like it's going to be the place people are going to want to be, unless you're a white nationalist Christian or something, right? So,
Or unless you want to fight them.
yeah,
Because that's what you know what I mean? Because that's what they're looking for, is they're looking for a fight. And it's like, can we just not be assholes? It's like, well, I'm going to fight to be an asshole. Literally. It's like, oh my God, really? This is what
they realize that over the past while, they're slowly but surely losing their privilege, and they're not liking it. So they're going to kick and scream like little fucking children.
Yeah.
And hopefully, ultimately, it doesn't work in their favor. But they're getting into positions of power, and that's what's scary.
Oh, yeah, and what's going down there is genocide. Plain and simple, it's genocide.
It's fucking horrifying. Just don't learn from the past.
Yeah, those who can't remember their past are condemned to repeat it.
Yep.
But anyways, what was really controversial I did was during some of the pray at home phases in this cycle. Basically, this rewinds to several years earlier in Flanders in the Netherlands, where I'm not in this part of the story, but it ties into my story. There were very vibrant Catholic parishes in Flanders that were closing because there was no priest to staff them.
People aren't going into it.
What?
People aren't going into the clergy like they used to.
Yes. So basically, the Dutch Dominicans decided to do a research on what to do about that. And they came to their findings, and they showed them to the Dominicans in Rome, and the Dominicans in Rome were like, no, don't show this. This will sow division in the church. And then the Dutch Dominicans thought about it, and they said, like, we know that they're saying that we shouldn't, or not to publish this, but this really needs to be published, so we're going to publish it anyway. So they published it, and basically, it's a paper called Church and Ministry, and basically for the first half, it talks about the history of the whole idea of apostolic succession. and how it came to the version of it that exists today. And then it goes on to basically give what they recommend that the people in these parishes should do about that situation of there being no priests for their parishes.
Mm.
What they suggested to do was basically to pick anyone from among them that they felt was most qualified and trustworthy to serve as a priest. Whether they be gay, straight, married, or celibate, a man or a woman. And they should then present that person to the bishop for ordination.
Mm.
And then, if the bishop refuses to ordain them and can't give a reason for that refusal that is grounded in proper Christology or something, what they should do is to gather around whoever they picked, pray over them as a community, and ordain them that way.
Is that like it almost seems like the express route, like we get a whole bunch of them together and do the whole prayer ritual thing, and then they're all good to go.
Group graduation.
Yeah.
Yeah, obviously this is something that would be very, that was very controversial.
I imagine.
Because it definitely doesn't go along with the modern concept of what apostolic succession is.
Right.
Which the church has doubled down on ever since the Council of Trent.
Oh, okay.
And basically, according to this paper, basically, before the Council of Nicaea, the confidence of the people was seen as the source of the priest's authority, and the blessing from the earlier bishops was basically a blessing to help them along the way. And that after the Council of Nicaea, when the whole thing became enmeshed in imperial power, was when the blessing from the previous clerics was started to be seen as the source of the clerical authority.
Right.
But anyways, I took basically what the Dutch Dominicans did a step further. And basically, to make a long story short, I found a way to get some of the proper wafers, and I just got some unleavened bread, basically. I think I for a while used water crackers. I used found unleavened bread, and I basically.
Did you know that for
what?
Oh no! I just something popped up on my phone, and I just turned it off. That's all.
Yeah, and basically, I during that time period, I would just say mass at home. I got them, and I just said mass at home. And occasionally, one friend of mine would occasionally join me.
Okay.
And so that's probably the most controversial thing I did.
Mass at home?
Yeah.
Because I don't think you're supposed to do that at home. That's supposed to be under the roof of a church, if I remember correctly.
Oh, I'm not supposed to do it at home, but the thing is, I had no church because there was no church I could go to that was basically, in order to go to any church without enduring spiritual abuse, I would have to drive past several other parishes to get there. And the fact that of knowing why I would have to drive that far would never be lost on me,
Right.
and that caused their power of yeah. So basically, I couldn't really go to church to a church without enduring spiritual abuse. So
You say that. What do you mean by spiritual abuse?
like basically someone using one's religion to manipulate them, to shame them, to hurt
Mhm.
someone, to scar someone psychologically.
Through a
Use,
religious lens, I guess, then.
yeah.
Okay. Which often happens, which happens actually, sorry, more often than it should.
Yeah, so that's where I was. But anyways, so that was this cycle that went through basically until I moved to Philadelphia.
Is that where you
Been
are
there.
now?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've not been to Philadelphia either, and I really want to go there because I want to eat a real McCoy Philly cheesesteak.
Mhm. I want that.
So, yeah,
Road trip,
yeah.
business expense. We're going to visit a church that someone once went to. So we'll have to go to Philly. And then I
Yeah,
think there's
yeah.
someone went to that church in Vegas. There's that church in New York, Hawaii.
Let me know.
Yeah.
Do let me know when you come to town.
Oh, for sure. Oh, for
If we
sure.
ever get out that way.
Yeah. Well,
Um,
we'll work on it.
But yeah. Anyways, I was
So,
still what?
real quick here, Oz came in late. Sophia was a Catholic, yes, but was raised in the Jewish faith, or
I was
more of a
raised
secular Jew.
cultural Jew.
Yeah, cultural
It,
Jew, but found some stuff in the rituals of Catholicism that attracted her to that belief system, and ultimately found your way out of that as well. And you also were delved in some paganism, like myself as well. So there you
yeah.
go.
Anyways, in I was in. I couldn't. I couldn't. I basically completely stopped any form of Catholic practice within a number of months after moving to Philadelphia. Definitely within a year, or about maybe a bit plus. I don't know whether it was a little bit more or a little bit less than a year exactly, but it was very basically that I couldn't justify doing my own thing at home when there was the existence of a sorry.
Carry on.
I couldn't justify doing my own stuff at home when there was a dignity chapter in Philadelphia, but I couldn't feel at peace with the dignity chapter because Dignity USA is so indifferent to the fact that they are stuck on a certain model that prevents them from doing anything in in the Bible Belt, which is where I would argue they're needed the most.
Mm-hmm.
And so I basically felt completely not at peace. And this led me to again looking for things outside of Christianity. I mean, I'd a few times often gone to a Quaker meeting house in
Oh boy.
Knoxville before moving to Philadelphia for a while. But I also tried going to a Quaker meeting house here in Philly. Yeah, I moved from Knoxville, where there's very few Quakers, to Philadelphia, where there's many Quakers. And one of the things I miss from East Tennessee is the Quakers.
Well, Quakers, as far as I understand, even though they're quite religious, they're still, I, I don't want to say more liberal than other groups that are like sort of fundy religious, but they're a lot less, I think, restrictive than some of the other ones, I
Depends
guess.
which Quaker group.
Oh, okay. Maybe there is something like that then. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyways, I tried there, and then I also tried to go religious again from a Jewish standpoint, where there's more cultural support for that here in Philadelphia,
Oh, yeah.
but I also realized while doing so that keeping kosher would be logistically impossible for me.
They have good oats, says John Hudson.
Yeah, and especially with my nutritional needs because of the weird way my body works.
Mhm.
So my nutritional needs, there's no way I would be able to keep kosher, and it really, so
I understand, because if I'm not allowed to have bacon, I'm going into convulsions.
A pile on the floor.
Yeah.
the issue is more like keeping the meat and the milks, not just the meat and the milk themselves, but not letting them touch the same dish that was, even if the
Yeah.
dish is cleaned in
It's
between them.
ridiculous.
Absolutely insane. And I would say that I would like to do videos sometime about how blatantly wasteful kashrut is.
Yeah, kosher law is
I
ridiculous
it is blatantly wasteful. I feel bad about the
and
times.
outdated. It's not necessary.
Yeah, I feel bad about the times that I have to use paper plates because sometimes with my disabilities, the dishes can just get too overwhelming if I don't because of my disabilities. I feel bad about that. I feel bad about my effect on the environment when I have to do that.
Well, you don't do
But
it all the time, every time, using a different plate for every single thing. Like you're not
oh yeah, I try to
using
reuse the
100 plate.
even when I do
Yeah.
use paper plates, I try to reuse them as much as I can. I try to
Yeah, if you just
reuse
got
them
like a
as
sandwich, then you throw some cookies on there later, maybe some chips. Yeah, I see what you're saying.
yeah.
Sometimes you just
But
have some laying around.
the thing is, they use paper plates when they easily could have avoided it by just realizing that God isn't real.
Save
And
a
they
lot of
could have
money
Just
that
a
way.
mythological
they,
character.
yeah, yeah, and also also if you break you have that there's a certain dish that is a present part of any Orthodox Jewish kitchen where when you make an egg you break it in there to make sure there's no blood because if there's any sign of blood you have to throw the perfectly good egg away. There's people starving in this world and you're throwing an egg away because there's a drop of blood in it.
I know. It's just, unleash your inner vampire and eat the fucking egg, all right?
I mean, you're already in the kitchen. You know what I mean?
Yeah, right?
Like the stove's right there. You're gonna cook something. Got the pan sitting there.
Yeah. Yeah. Now though I want to say one thing is the Jewish aversion to eating blood, it's not there's more to that than just the belief in the mythological character that supposedly initially commanded it. It's also that during the Middle Ages and afterwards, for a lot of people in the Jewish culture, that prohibition against eating blood was the number one alibi against the blood libel.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
for that reason, there is a cultural thing to the. So, it wouldn't be fair to criticize that without pointing out that that there is a the historical reason for that taboo to be strong in the Jewish community that goes way beyond superstition and a higher mythological being. But that said, it does ignore, even though it doesn't, that reason does not rely on a mythological being, does it does rely on ignorance of human psychology, because
Yeah.
somebody who is far enough down a rabbit hole that they will believe in such a blatant conspiracy theory as the blood libel, you're not going to stop them by throwing out an egg just because it has a little
Yeah,
blood.
right. Exactly.
Yeah,
That's not going to stop
but
shit.
yeah, but my point is, but I still think I should mention that there is more to that taboo than just belief in a mythology. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That is
Yeah.
to be fair, I have to mention that.
Yeah, for
Uh,
sure.
um, I mean, I not only will eat an egg if it has a little bit of blood in it, but I will also not have my foods put in salt to drain the blood out of it. And as a matter of fact, I try to make sure as much of the meat juice as possible goes into the crock pot when I cook my my beef stew. But I'm still not going to abduct 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 Gentile children and put their blood in matzah. I still am not going to do anything.
Oh, there goes my weekend plans. But just so you know, after working with a butcher, the red stuff that you get in meat that's packaged in today's day and is actually dye. It's not blood. There's no blood in meat products.
They desanguinate all the animals at the plant.
Yeah.
Okay, but even if that weren't the case, even if that weren't, when I go to Chinatown, I often order a dish that has when I that
You've
has
made Deneen hungry.
the dish that has basically what I call Chinese blood pudding. You know, basically
Yeah.
that pig's blood dish they have.
Yeah.
I order that whenever I go to Chinatown. But I still am not going, but that does not mean that I'm going to abduct Gentile children and use their.
The Chinese blood pudding stuff or whatever is probably the least kosher thing on the planet.
Oh,
if
yeah,
you
I'm
think
sure
about
it is. It is.
It's like
It is.
here's kosher and here's the opposite of what kosher is.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's like somebody says I need to eat a bacon cheeseburger
Yeah.
burger in
Yeah.
order to prove that I'm not religious. It's like, dude,
Just
I've
eat them because they're
eaten
good.
I've eaten that. I don't need to eat that to prove that I'm not religious. Because after I eat at Chinatown, I've got nothing to prove in that department.
On one side of the scale, you got manna, and then on the other side of the scale, you got the Chinese blood pudding.
Oh, it's
Yeah.
good stuff.
Yeah. That's the most non-kosher thing on the planet.
I mean, other than they say we atheists like to grill up our babies on the barbecue, so have a little baby pie going on there for the weekend. Baby pot pie. There we go.
Oh yeah, I was like trying to write with somebody a parody script. You know how a parody script. You know how there's a movie called Not Another Teen Movie, which is a parody
Yeah.
on teen rom-coms. Date Movie, which is a parody on date movies.
Scary
Several.
movie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was thinking of writing I don't know if I ever get it produced, but just at least writing a movie called Christian movie that would parody Christian movies, whose
That has
primary,
potential, I
yeah,
think.
that would be primarily based on God's Not Dead, but it would have scenes of, but it would like have a scene where there's like an atheist family having breakfast and they're eating baby.
All the absolute ridiculous stereotypes being tossed in there and stuff like that. I think it has potential to be funny, and you could do it in such an angle where you're sort of showcasing and satiring the modern day attempt to be taken over by the white nationalists, Christian nationalists, and stuff like that too. Be a good social piece too, I think.
But that's something I really would like to do someday, is to make a movie called Christian Movie. Oh, and there's other things that they're planned. Where this one, instead of him having to argue that God's not dead in front of the classroom, he has to argue in front of the U.S. Supreme Court. Because why not?
Yeah, somebody wake up Brett Kavanaugh from his midday drunken nap so he can fucking deliberate on something.
Never mind that he's a first year college student, not a lawyer, and that it is not even a question about law.
Useless man. What a useless man he is.
Yeah. Anyways, so that's where I was at this point. But then at a certain point, at a certain point, I just found that I just couldn't pray anymore, because I guess I felt that the praying was falling on deaf ears. I hadn't yet gotten to the point of realizing that there wasn't a God, but I got to the point that I couldn't pray. And about the same time, also, I read The Letter from a Birmingham Jail by Martin Luther King. And he talked about how they had to use disruptive demonstrations because disruptive protests, because non-disruptive protests would lead to minimal changes at best that would be shortly after overturned, because the white establishment wouldn't willingly make changes. So I started wondering, why would the white establishment not allow the changes? And I figured some of them, of course, probably were genuinely selfish people. Some of them.
Oh, I'm sure.
But I think the majority of them, and I know this might seem far-fetched today on the other side of history, actually think of how it may sound far-fetched to us, but many of them probably just didn't understand, no matter how much it was pointed out to them, that no matter how much it was pointed out to them, that no matter how much it was pointed out to them why it is a problem that, for example, that Black people don't have the same sitting accommodations on the bus as everyone else, that it was that they really couldn't understand what the problem was, no matter how much it was pointed out to them, because they weren't the ones who suffered from it, and they were so used to things being a certain way that they thought of it as that's how it ought to be.
That's normal.
Yeah, like it was normal to be that way.
Yeah. And I think it may have this may have been a thing not just in the oppression of Black people, but in the oppression of any group. Even somebody who gets all ticked off when someone says "Happy Holiday" rather than "Merry Christmas." And that's not an atheist versus theist thing. That's more of a thing about someone from a Christianity-based culture versus other cultures. Because an atheist who is from a Christianity-based culture would celebrate, no doubt, Christmas just the same. So,
Yep.
so for them, it wouldn't be. So for them, Merry Christmas is just as applicable to them as it is to the most devout Christian. But
Sure.
but it's more about people from different culture, inclusion of different people from different cultures.
Different
And
holidays.
yes, different
Like
culture.
Hanukkah, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Right. So by saying happy holidays, you're just being inclusive. That's all.
exactly.
We
But
won't
thing is,
have it.
but a lot of people, they don't understand it because they're so used to everybody saying Merry Christmas that it just doesn't make sense to why that could be a problem for some people.
Well, they don't
just
want to
don't
be
understand.
displaced.
That's right.
Exactly. But thing is, so I thought, what if everybody could? What if there was a method of logic, of being logical, that was so that you could that if everyone was trained, and basically this is the reason why we have to practically fight a war, not necessarily a military war, but a war in the sense that there's a great struggle and lives are lost.
Hmm.
Why we have to fight a war for every step of moral progress in society. And I thought maybe this could change if everyone was taught a method of logic that was so rigorous that you could successfully critique your own arguments and see where there's an over. Obviously, I never achieved that goal. I want to, but it did make me train myself to improve my rational thinking abilities somewhat. And I was sitting in a in the and I was sitting at Second Street Station one day in the Market Frankfurt line, and I realized, why do I believe in God? Why, no, even though I've switched around what God I've believed in, I've always had to believe in God. It's like, because I've made it a core part of my identity to be a believer. And
Hmm.
then I realized my excuse for believing in God all the time was like, oh, I can't accept being on the fence, so I have to decide one way or the other. So I pick believing over disbelieving.
Right.
But thing is, then I thought like, but I never asked myself, why can't I just be on the fence? I never asked myself that. And then I realized that I had as part of my identity had believing in some higher power as part of my identity.
Right.
And then
Right.
I realized that's not a good reason to believe.
That's right.
And and that's when I stopped. That was a moment I at first called myself an agnostic,
Hmm.
but then within like a few weeks I fully embraced the label of atheist.
There are some atheists that do identify as agnostic atheists.
I would
I
say I'm
personally,
yeah,
I
I would
personally
say
think
I'm
agnostics are copping out. To be honest, I think they're still atheists, but yeah.
I would say I'm an agnostic atheist with regards to any concept of God other than the tri-omni God, but I am gnostically a. Basically, I think that the possibility of there being any kind of God is just more likely that there is not than that there is. But I am absolutely convinced that the tri-omni God does not exist.
Oh,
Because
I don't
sorry
think
that
any do.
I don't think any do, but any version that is not the triomni God is merely very unlikely, as opposed to the triomni God, which I consider to be absolutely impossible.
Yeah.
Because sorry, but the problem of evil is completely airtight, and
Yep.
and the theodicies don't work because like the greater good theodicy, maybe the omnipotent beings don't face trolley problems. Sorry.
Right. I'm an atheist myself. I pretty much believe that the idea of the question of the existence of God is meaningless because the word God has no real coherent or has no coherent and unambiguous definition. So until I can get a definition that everyone agrees on, which will never happen, then just to talk about the existence of a deity of God is useless to me. It's like I don't care. I think if this omnipotent, omnipresent, omniscient, and omnibenevolent being were real, first of all, you can't be omnipotent and omnibenevolent. The two don't work.
Well,
So there's a problem right there.
if he's not omniscient, then there's the possibility that maybe he is unaware that there's suffering's going on if he's not
Then he's not
omniscient.
omnipresent or omniscient,
Yeah, that's the thing. If he's
right?
yeah.
The whole idea is it's like somebody just tried to make an OP mythological character, and it ended up being this version or any version, I guess, of the Abrahamic deity that people call Yahweh or whatever the fuck you want to call. But yeah, sorry, but it's not enough. So you gotta give me a definition of what you mean by God, and then I usually ask people, okay, well, if this is the God you chose to believe in, well, not chose you, the God you believe in, because I don't really believe we choose our beliefs. I think we're either convinced of something or we're not. If this is the God you picked to believe in, then how did you disprove all of the other deities, the literally hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of other deities that humans have come up with over the years, over our history? How did you disprove those? How did you find out that those were fake and this guy was real? And
That
whatever
reminds me of a
method you
video I saw.
used
That
for
reminds me
your
of a
God.
video. Yeah, that reminds me of a video I saw many years ago about with an atheist explaining why he is an atheist. As an atheist, he doesn't believe in Poseidon. So because usually when someone's explaining why they're an atheist, they explain why they don't believe in Jesus. But instead was explaining why he doesn't believe in Poseidon.
A short book.
Dr. Mike says he's a vanilla Coke theist. I believe vanilla Coke is God.
Oh man, I do love me some vanilla Coke. That's how you remix a rum and Coke the right way.
Hello, Pragmatic Crystal. Yes, yeah, pretty much what I just said. Whatever methodology you use to prove all the other gods, apply that to your own God. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So anyway, so then that was when I finally stopped believing. But thing is,
Bravo.
for the most part, many people feel a profound loss when they stop believing. But for the
Yeah.
most part, it was a load off my shoulders because my imaginary friend and I were not in a good place.
I guess not, yeah.
We're not in a good place because while I know that there are many people whose lives are much worse than mine, there are some things about my life that are genuinely a difficult pill to swallow. And and I would pray to God so many times asking, why can't you either make it possible for me to attain these things or make it possible for me to transcend the desire for these things? Why can't you do either one? Your pick of whichever the two you want to do.
Mm-hmm.
Just just don't leave me in this position of being unable to stop desiring something I'm unable to obtain. And
Yeah.
and thing is that being in that situation was a tough pill to swallow. But the idea that there was a all-loving sky daddy who could do anything he wants and therefore implicitly could, with a snap of his finger, solve that problem from one end or either end or even both ends, but didn't consider it worthwhile doing, that was what really broke my heart.
Mm.
That was what really broke my heart. And so for that reason, stopping to believe was a load off my shoulders because it was that because that extra insult to injury was removed.
Hmm.
And the only thing I then missed, of course, was that feeling of communion. And that was when I developed that secular ritual of communion.
Right. Yeah, I
So
think
that's
there's nothing wrong with that at all. I think humans on some level desire little rituals. Because we all do them daily. Let's face it, we do have our little rituals that we do every day. I think we're just sort of ritualistically based in a lot of ways.
yeah, this has to do with the reason why I was so scandalized by the fact that Dignity USA was okay sticking to a model of forming chapters that prevented them from having any foothold in the Bible Belt.
Mm,
Because when you are facing really difficult stuff in life, sometimes that extra feeling of that spiritual hug
hmm.
in the form of a little wafer can be what you need to keep moving in a difficult situation. And the fact that they didn't even seem to care about the fact that they weren't able, and in East Tennessee and places in the Bible Belt are where it's like hardest to find. It's basically where LGBT people are facing the most difficulties. Wasn't as bad now as it wasn't as bad then as it is now, but it still was a heck of a lot worse than it is in the more progressive areas where Dignity is able to establish a foothold, where Dignity USA is able to establish a foothold, and they were not willing to find some other way to establish a foothold in using the broken communities that exist in East Tennessee, because basically it's a place where the LGBT community, especially the trans community, it's mostly people who are there because they can't get a ticket out,
Hmm.
not people who are stuck there because they can't get a ticket out, um, and people who are so broken, so messed up from all the constant abuse they suffer under the system there, that it's no wonder that they're never able to really meet the high hurdle that is needed by Dignity USA to form a chapter.
Yeah. Well, we have gone past the hour
Oh,
here,
sorry.
Sophia. That's quite all right. I'm never pressured that it has to be an hour. Like if we need to go over a little bit to get some more clarification or some more things said, then we do that, and that's not a problem. But I do want to thank you a lot for coming on and sharing with us everything that you went through as a
Yeah, thanks for
believer in
coming.
different faiths and stuff.
And I
And
hope
I
that what
hope
I go
Hmm?
on.
I was
I
just going to
hope
say,
that
hopefully somebody can glean something from that and it helps them, because that's one of the reasons I do this, right? So,
I
and what
hope
were you
what
going to say?
I hope I've been helpful.
Yeah, I'm sure somebody will get something out of it. But definitely, all you folks out there in the chat, I recommend you check out her YouTube channels. They're linked below. And also, if you like what you see and hear and stuff like that, you can follow Sophia around on Twitter. I've got her Twitter link as well.
Oh, my first album is coming out
In
on
March.
in March. So yeah.
Right. I do my research, people. But it's not. It was right there, anyways, when I went over to the channel and checked it out too. Very intriguing. The lyrics kind of hit hard, so I definitely check that out. Um, but thank you, Sophia, for coming and joining Mikey and me today on the show. And thanks to everyone in the YouTube chat, Twitter chat, and Twitch chat. Thank you all for hanging out with us. I hope you guys got a little something out of today's show. And all my amazing patrons, and we have memberships now, and so our amazing members, you can click join below if you want to do that. It helps support the show, and we could always use whatever we can to get the show to get even better and better as time goes on. And we work on it. Trust me, we do work on it. We now have a link to Mikey's merch if you want, which I've got right here. Mikey's merch store. You can pick up some of Mikey's merch. And I'm going to have mine there soon. As a matter of fact, probably within the next week, because I have some ideas about it. I think I'm just going to take the logo that you see, but it'll be the Deconversion Stories one or whatever. And I'll get that on t-shirts and, phone cases or whatever. Yeah. So if you want something, that'd be cool. Anyways, as I always say at the end of the interviews, we are doing an after party, guys. I'm pretty sure Sophia will stick with us for a little bit longer in the after party. So if you want to be involved, let us know. We'll get a link to you. And as I always say at the end of the interview parts, like the late, great Christopher Hitchens once said, it's called faith because it's not knowledge. And we'll see you guys next time.
Yeah.
Bye.
Yeah.
What's untangled?